Good evening, Eye2Eye. This week you sent me a video that you made, and therefore I presume that your intention was for me to watch it and reply to it. It contains what you call the top 16 most impaired mistakes atheists make, and it apparently took you less than an hour to come up with them. Okay, well, I watched your video, and my first thought was that you really should have put a little more time and effort into your endeavour. Here is my reply. Let's start with mistake number 1. The shock of God question. A question so dumb that I think that it is likely that most of your viewers will have turned off the video once they saw this. You put a new spin on it, though, by stating that atheism is denial of just the Lord, which makes this interesting, not least because this definition is wrong. You see, by your definition, all Jews are atheists because they deny that Jesus was the Messiah and the Son of God, and as Jesus was a Jew, he must technically, by your definition, be an atheist too. And as his teachings are the basis for Christianity, the religion that you follow, then it really should be you that needs to provide evidence that the teachings of Jesus, an atheist by your own definition, are accurate and correct. Now, do you see why that question is stupid? Let's move on to point 2. We call you names and make fun of you. Yes, we do, and there is a very good reason for it. The scientific advancements in the last century are such that scientific achievements and technology in use today could conceivably be confused with magic by people alive in the 19th century. Prior to the last century, there was still some debate amongst physicists regarding the existence of atoms, but less than 50 years later, scientists were splitting them and levelling cities. If, just 100 years later, you were to deny the existence of the atom today, you would be laughed at as an idiot, and your arguments could be refuted by schoolchildren. There would be no need to refute you scientifically, as the application of science based on the certainty of the existence of the atom is all around you, from the mobile phone in your pocket to the Teflon on your frying pan. Your assertions based upon the Bible are thousands of years old and in many cases contradict themselves, let alone everyday reality, so why would I need to expend effort in explaining the absurdity of talking snakes, flying donkeys, unicorns and zombies scientifically, when you can present no evidence for them other than the fact that they are written about in your book, and even schoolchildren know that they don't exist? I'll talk to you about science when you stop talking to me about fairy tales and ghost stories. In the meantime, I'm going to keep laughing at you. Let's move on to point 3, which I honestly do not understand in the slightest. You do not need to be scientific not to believe in God. In many cases, atheism, the disbelief in a god or gods, is brought about by people actually reading the holy book in question and realizing that it is twaddle from end to end. You don't need to be a scientist to not believe in unicorns, and not all Christians are nice people. Adolf Hitler, for instance, was a Catholic. Just saying. Let's move on to point 4. No, we do not confuse evolution with variation within the kinds. The term evolution, where it refers to evolution by way of natural selection, is defined in precise scientific terms. You cannot explain to me what a kind is with the same precision. To you, an orangutan, a gorilla, and a chimp are all kinds of ape, just as lions, tigers, and domesticated house cats are all kinds of cat, and wolves, dingoes, hyenas, and Dobermans are all kinds of dog. Variation within the kinds is purely something that creationists like you use to enable you to create a framework from which you can deny the obvious evidence of evolution, and significantly reduce the number of animals that Noah needed to take on his little voyage. Of course, to get from a pair of generic cat kinds or dog kinds that went on that boat just 4,000 years ago would require a form of hyper-evolution that would see lions giving birth to tigers and wolves giving birth to dogs. Your terms of reference are just plain wrong. Get over it. Point 5. Just because we use a term that is commonly used to describe a particular form of behavior does not mean that we agree or subscribe to your account of the origin of the word used to describe it. Your particular mythology is just one of many such mythologies that have, through the ages, been used to propose an origin for such behaviors, and as atheists do not believe in any of them, they see no contradiction when using these terms. Like I said, you really should have spent a little longer than an hour thinking these ones through. Point 6. Yes, we can explain the origin of morality in non-theistic terms. The next part of your point is irrelevant, and any dark histories that atheism has played in society pales into insignificance compared to the immorality and pitch-black evil committed in the name of religion throughout mankind's short existence on this planet. At the risk of invoking Goodwin's Law by constantly invoking the Nazis, the Jews were chosen as a scapegoat for society's ills during 1930s and 40s Germany, in part for their rejection of Christ as their Messiah, and for allowing him to be crucified. If you want to talk about the dark morals of Christianity, then you should only examine the Catholic Church, which does not seem to have improved much from its dark early days of iniquity, as even today it is racked with scandals of sexual abuse of children, as well as many other scandals over deceitful behaviour that can only bring untold harm to millions of people. The word hypocrisy describes a form of behaviour where someone will impose a restriction or decry the actions of another while doing the self-same thing themselves, but decreeing that the rules that they espouse do not apply to them. Think about that one. Moving on to point 7. Wow. Just wow. So you are objecting to atheist criticism of your particular mythology, which you freely admit insists that an invisible magician with multiple personality disorders and anger management problems, who sleeps in all day on Sundays and hates gays, bacon sandwiches and shellfish, and seems to love extra well-done lamb chops and watching you masturbate. You are implying that we don't mind Eastern religions, which promote philosophical thinking rather than the blind worship of a deity for fear of being thrown into a pit of fire, and best of all, we apparently love teaming up with the Muslims. The Muslims? Are you serious? Their batshit insane drivel is even more insane than yours. But you saved the best bit for last, because you are obviously totally ignorant of the reality that Islam is also an Abrahamic religion and is an offshoot of Judaism just like Christianity, and that Allah is simply the Arabic word for God. Even if you claim that I am wrong and that you worship Jesus, you worship Jesus as the Son of God, God in human form and part of the Trinity of God the Father, God the Son and God the Holy Ghost, but essentially the same God as worshipped by the Jews as well as the Muslims. I suppose that if you are going to be wrong, you might as well be really wrong. On to point 8. Oh, for Christ's sake. The invocation of your deity when cursing has absolutely nothing to do with religion. Such phrases are more part of the cultural language used more than anything else. Of course, I could use the phrase, oh for fuck's sake, if you would like, but it tends to be more frowned upon due to the inclusion of an expletive, and we really know how much you don't like expletives. Please try to be a little more consistent in your thinking, because it's very disappointing. On to point 9. This one is just horseshit. Given the choice of believing that a bat is a bird because the Bible says it is, or that a bat is a mammal because science can prove that it is, you are saying that I should dismiss the scientific evidence and believe the Bible. Seriously? This is just one small example, but really there are countless much bigger examples that I could use where your book of fairy tales is just plain wrong. As for Bible-believing Christians establishing branches of science, so what? Sir Isaac Newton laid down the foundations of study into gravitational theory and optics because he strayed away from his theology. However, these areas make up just a small part of his writings, and where he tried on many occasions to reconcile his observations with the teachings of the Bible, he failed miserably and utterly, which is why he's not widely known for these works. Naturally, of course, as you are bringing up the this point in your argument, you will be aware that Newton's religious views were rather heretical, and that he would have been shunned had they been known while he was alive. Also, you will be aware that areas of science established by Bible-believing Christians were not contentious at the time, but developments within these fields have since gone on to disprove large parts of your holy book. Science and the Bible only go along with each other fine if you ignore the Bible. Point 10. Yes, we do indeed say that creationists and creation scientists are uneducated. This is plain and obvious in many cases. Please, explain exactly how a degree in Christian Science and the Bible, or any other qualification in a field other than biology, qualifies you to comment on the validity of biological principles. When you go to the doctor, you expect to be treated by someone with a medical degree of some form. Tell me, would you allow a surgeon to operate on you if the only qualification he had was in fine art or divinity, and he had gained his medical knowledge by watching YouTube videos, listening to his priest, and reading a few Wikipedia articles? No, I wouldn't think so. So why would you take the word of engineers, lawyers, and historians over that of biologists who specialize in the specialist field of evolutionary biology when it comes to the specialist field of evolutionary biology? With regards to your observations on current society and its particular unsavoury traits, please remember that in your country around 80% of the population is Christian. Those traits that you describe are, 4 times out of 5, traits of your fellow Bible believers. And yes, I agree, they show no sign of an educated generation whatsoever. As regards religion within science, of course, you do realize that if you include the possibility that a magical deity may be involved in your scientific experiment, then you can never be entirely sure if the outcome of your experiment was the result of some form of supernatural intervention. In order to get anywhere, these godly men of science would have had to discount the possibility of divine intervention when conducting their research in order to make any headway whatsoever. Take the science of aerodynamics and flight, for instance. We all know that a Boeing 747 weighs a considerable amount, and it isn't likely to spontaneously rise up from the ground and float around in mid-air. But thanks to our understanding of aerodynamics and the principles of powered flight, we can predict with some certainty that we will be able to use it to fly across great distances and land safely. If we are going to invoke the possibility that a deity is involved, then we must consider that our understanding of aerodynamics is flawed, and that the aeroplane's ability to cruise at 30,000 feet for hours at a time could possibly be due to the hand of God holding it up there, which of course begs the question, how many hands has God got? And yes, it appears that you have no objection to Isaac Newton being a heretic, who denied the principle of the Holy Trinity and believed that the worshipping of Christ was idolatry and a fundamental sin. And you argue that alchemy, the turning of base metals into gold, which was one of his primary endeavours throughout his life, is entirely scientific and a worthwhile endeavour that we should be pursuing today. Point 11. You really don't get it, do you? There may be some evidence that the world is young, but the evidence that the world is over 4 billion years old is absolutely overwhelming. In order for evidence that the world is young to be taken seriously, it has to comprehensively and utterly refute all of the evidence that has been presented that it is not. Your evidence does not do that. In fact, the evidence for the world being old utterly refutes the evidence for the world being young. Fundamental Christianity at one point believed that the world was flat, but changed its mind in the face of the evidence. Maybe someday fundamental Christianity will do the same with regards to the age of the earth. As we wait, we will move on to point 12. No, we are applying those words correctly. It is you who does not accept that they apply to you. You will happily agree that these words are all applied correctly when assigned to the actions of some lunatic cult out there on the fringes of society looking upon their actions with disdain. We just see no differentiation between the actions of some mad cult and the actions of fundamental Christianity. Tell me, if I went up to your screaming child in the supermarket and threatened it with torture by throwing it into a fire if it did not shut up and behave, would you object? If so, why? You would obviously have no objection to doing it yourselves. In fact, that is one of the fundamental tenets of your beliefs. I personally see that as mentally abusing a child. Where is the confusion? Point 13. Yes, we do, and yes, you do. Would you care to explain how you don't? As regards to your comments on survival of the fittest, I fail to see how pointing out that organisms that best fit their environments are more likely to survive can be circular reasoning. I would consider that to be just common sense. As for dating rocks with fossils and fossils with rocks, you are obviously oblivious to the fact that both rocks and fossils can be dated by other means, and have been dated by other means. Naturally, as you can expect, where a rock containing a certain type of fossil has been dated to a certain age, and that fossil is not found in rocks of any other age, it is quite reasonable to assume that any rocks found to contain that fossil is of a certain age, and therefore the fossils in it are also the same age. The age of the rock can, of course, be independently verified, but here is a clue for you. You don't find fossils in rocks that are older or younger than the rocks that they are founding. The fossil got into the rock as the rocks were being formed, so naturally they will be the same age. If you know differently, then please enlighten us. However, please be aware that you could be overturning centuries of geological scientific understanding, so we will be looking at the details in your theory. Point 14. I have been looking forward to getting to this bit. If there was one single statement in your whole video that clearly demonstrated that you have not got the slightest bloody clue as to what you are talking about, then this would be it. You have bemoaned how we call you creationists uneducated, and that we mock you for your utter lack of understanding of even the simplest concepts, and then you present us with this blinding example of your utter inability to look up the most simple of terms. The term Bronze Age refers to the most advanced technology of the era, not a layer of strata in the ground. The Stone Age was the working of stone tools, the Bronze Age was the working of bronze, and the Iron Age was the working of iron. Likewise, the Atomic Age was last century, when atomic science was the pinnacle of technological achievement, as was the Computer Age not so long ago. And now we are in the Information Age, where the Internet and access to and manipulation of information is at the forefront of technology. As we are in the information age right now, and as you now have instant access to information such as what is the Bronze Age, with an ease that is unlike at any other time in human history, I have to ask you why you have not looked that up, and why I need to correct your mistake. Such a mistake clearly shows that you have entered into this debate without the most basic preparation or understanding to what you are talking about. You have turned up to a knife fight with a spoon. You cannot honestly expect us to take you seriously when you don't even take the time to understand our rebuttals to your inane assertions. You point to scripture in your book of myths, but you utterly fail to comprehend that we have already read it and contemplated it and dismissed it. Not out of hand, but because it makes no sense at all, and it contradicts the observable world around us, and only makes any sense when it is read with the technological understanding of someone who lived in the Bronze Age, before man discovered how to smelt iron and forge iron tools. In the 21st century, its mythology is redundant, and it remains just that, mythology. Please understand that you are not bringing anything new to the discussion. You're not bringing about any advancements in understanding. On the contrary, you are calling for us to disregard all advancements in scientific understanding for the last 2,000 years at the very least. We really don't mind leaving you behind if that is where you want to be. All that we ask is you stop trying to hold us back. Point 15. Oh, for fuck's sake, this one is inane. The idea of AD and BC was concocted 1500 years ago by a short Roman bloke called Dennis. Really? Seriously, it was. If you don't believe me, then go look it up. Dennis was trying to work out a table for when Easter would fall over the next few years, and simply set the dates on the tables as dates after the birth of Christ, because, as you can guess, Dennis was a Christian. The dating method caught on as previously. Years and eras had been marked by the consuls who held office that year, and using a reference numbering system from a common historical event was much easier than trying to remember back to the year of Bigus Dickus or similar. Thus, the modern dating system that we use today, the Gregorian calendar and the less accurate Julian calendar, was devised. The existence of Jesus has absolutely nothing at all to do with it. If in 500 years someone decides to base a calendar on the supposed birth of Harry Potter, based upon the publication dates of J.K. Rowling's books, and it catches on, will it prove the existence of Harry Potter 2,000 years from now? No, it bloody well will not, so your point is horseshit. Final point 16. Our erroneous, flawed, untrustworthy judging or classification. Really? Ulysses Kenthoven as a smart, wise, and intelligent man. Are you sure? His theories have been utterly debunked by just about everybody, from the most serious of scientists to the newest noob here on YouTube. Even Christian fundamentalists say that Kant's theories are utter tripe, and having read through and totally debunked his doctoral thesis, I will tell you for a fact that he has not got a clue what he is talking about. Maybe that is why he passes off articles used in science textbooks for school children as examples of cutting-edge science. He may well have taught high school science for 15 years, but I seriously doubt that it was taught very well. No. By the way, George Carlin was a comedian and actor who made his name on the stage and screen. He wasn't a scientist. I thought you might have wanted to know that. And the Expelled movie, that utter pile of steaming dogshit that dares to call itself a documentary. Throughout, the examples given can be utterly debunked, each one in turn as an outright distortion of the truth. Go look up the facts, go read the reviews. Teachers who claimed that they were sacked because they insisted on teaching fundamental Christian beliefs rather than what they were being paid to teach, leading to students complaining because they were failing their classes. An editor of a scientific journal who knowingly circumvented the peer review process to include a fundamentally flawed paper in a serious scientific journal, much to the anger of the readers of that journal, who picked it to shreds in moments as they read it, who claimed that he had been sacked for this when the truth was that this was his last issue as the editor because he had already resigned. Exactly who is untrustworthy? As for being stifled and censored by advocates of free speech, and that this is hypocritical, the fact that it was released at all and that I can buy it on Amazon debunks that myth straight away. Debunking horseshit as horseshit is not censorship. Picking the obvious holes in something that pretends to be true when it clearly isn't, but allowing people to see it anyway, isn't censorship. Now go tell that to the Christian groups stood outside cinemas and theatres with placards when someone produces a show that is critical of their beliefs or makes fun of their deity, and they insist on intimidating people who are going to see it, or they will start a riot unless the performance is stopped. Now, that is censorship. I can only suppose that your video was meant as some kind of joke, intended to give us all a good laugh at the expense of the ideas of fundamental Christians. If that was the case, then it surely succeeded. On the other hand, if it was serious, then it shows the woefully poor understanding of the arguments against your mythical tales from the crypt. It is painfully obvious that your opponents in this debate know your arguments inside out, whereas you have obviously no idea about what they're talking about, and you have no intention of finding out. You have spent nearly 9 minutes telling us how it is not fair that we think we are right and you are wrong, but you have offered us nothing that will change our mind or make us think. Please, try harder next time.